In this video, I'll talk about indirect statement, which in the Oxford Latin text is chapter 41. Indirect statement is similar to an indirect command and an indirect question in that it says something indirectly. Indirect command says a command indirectly. Indirect question says a question indirectly. Indirect statement has the speaker reporting a statement that someone else made. For example, if the direct statement is, Niobe said, I had many sons and daughters, Niobe makes a direct statement there. Somebody else might report that situation as, Niobe said that she had many sons and daughters. An indirect statement is introduced by a main verb of thinking, knowing, saying, showing, and verbs that are like those. This verb is followed by an independent clause, which in English is introduced by the word that. So, Niobe said that she had many sons and daughters. Note that in English, we don't always need the that in the sentence. I could say, Niobe said she had many sons and daughters. But it's good practice for students of Latin to put the that in there, just to be sure that we know that it's indirect statement. Some Latin verbs. There are many Latin verbs that introduce indirect statement. There's a list that I'm giving you right here: showing, knowing, hearing, hoping, seeing, and thinking, for example. What's indirect statement in Latin? In Latin, the verb in the clause is expressed by an infinitive. The subject of the indirect statement in that clause is in the accusative case. So, if the direct statement is, Niobe said, I have many sons and daughters, notice that our subject of the clause, ego, I have many sons and daughters, ego habeo, is the subject and verb. The indirect statement is going to look like this. Niobe said that she had many sons and daughters. Notice that she is going to turn into a third person thing. And third person, referring to the subject of the original sentence, is going to be the pronoun say. Notice that also the verb habeo changes to the plain old infinitive here, habere. In this situation, it's a present infinitive. We will talk later in the video about different tenses of infinitives. And notice here that we have the that we put in there. The subject and direct object of the infinitive phrase are both in the accusative case. Therefore, you may have two accusatives in the infinitive phrase. The infinitive phrase being that indirect statement part here. Notice in this particular one, we have all kinds of accusatives. Multos filios et filias, in fact, doesn't change from the direct statement to the indirect statement. Nothing would change if you're changing something from a direct statement to an indirect statement. Nothing changes except the subject and the verb. So, the first accusative in an indirect statement is going to be the one that's the direct object. Word order does make a difference. So if I wanted to say that, say in this example, Niobe said that many sons and daughters had pi, the sons and daughters would have to be before the pi, whatever that is in Latin. How to translate an indirect statement. The translation of the infinitive in the indirect statement depends on the tense of the main verb. The present infinitive indicates the same time as the main verb, no matter what tense that main verb is. A perfect infinitive indicates time before that main verb, and a future infinitive indicates time after that main verb. Let's take a closer look at these. Present infinitives with the same time as the main verb will look like this. If the main verb is present, the present infinitive will be translated as a present tense verb, being at the same time. So, with a present active infinitive, dico here is present tense. I say that the boys are calling. Notice vocare is a present infinitive, and I translate it as a present tense verb. If I wanted to see it as a passive voice. Diko is here as well. Wokari, I say that the boys are called. When the main verb is past, the present infinitive will also be translated as a past tense verb. So, Dixie, I said that the boys called. Notice that Wokari here is still a present infinitive, but in this example we translated it called. Here we translated it are calling, even though it's the same infinitive. So, as I said before, it depends on the tense of the main verb. I could translate it called, have called, or possibly even were calling. You can't really distinguish between things that are perfect and things that might sound like they were imperfect. The passive looks so. I said that the boys were called, as in have been called, would again be wokari. Perfect infinitives indicate time before the main verb, and that so when the main verb is present, the perfect infinitive will be translated with some past tense. So that looks like this. Diko pueros wokawise. I say that the boys called. I could use have called in the appropriate situation. Diko pueros wokatos esse. I say that the boys were called, as in have been called. Notice in this infinitive where I have the participle and esse, the participle part has to agree with its subject. So that's why it's wokatos. Pueros wokatos esse. When the main verb is past, a perfect infinitive being time before has to be translated with the verb had, or the helping verb had. So I said that the boys had called. Dixi pueros wokawise. I said that the boys had called. And in the passive, it's going to look like this. I said that the boys had been called. Again, wokatos, agreeing with pueros. Future infinitives indicate the time after the main verb. So if the main verb is in the present tense, a future infinitive can be translated with the helping verb will. We'll see that there are other ways to do this as we go. So I say that the boys will call. Diko, I say that the boys will call. Wokaturos esse, our future infinitive. Notice here also that the participle is agreeing with the subject of the indirect statement. Pueros, wokaturos. Notice also, though, that this could be translated, I say that the boys are, esse, as a present infinitive by itself, and then about to call. So you can sometimes think of this as a participle and the verb to be. It works as well when the main verb is past tense. I could translate it would, if that fits the situation. I said that the boys would call, or I could say the boys were about to call. Present infinitive with a past verb is going to be a were, and then about to call, agreeing with the boys. This big chart kind of sums up what we've just done. It's a sequence of tenses of sorts, sort of like with your subjunctive verbs. But notice that with a present main verb, a primary sequence main verb, if you will, there's no limit to the tenses. You can have all three tenses in either sequence, primary and secondary sequence, if that makes sense to you. This might be a handy chart to have as you're getting used to indirect statement. Here's some tips on recognizing an indirect statement. Because an indirect statement works so differently in Latin than it does in English, it's really important to be able to identify when one happens, because you have to kind of shift your thinking into indirect statement mode. Some things to look out for: that special introductory verb, saying, thinking, knowing, and that kind of stuff. If you can train yourself to start thinking about putting a that after any time you see a he says, he denies, he thinks, be suspicious that there might be a that after it. And if there is, then you look for your accusatives and infinitives. Number 2 here is say. Say is going to start being used a lot more than it has been up till now, and that's because very often it's going to be part of an indirect statement. It's going to be the subject of an indirect statement. Anytime somebody says he says that he, or they say that they, she says that she, it's going to have a say in it. Number 3 here, an excess of infinitives and accusatives. If you find yourself translating along and you can't figure out why are there 2 infinitives here, can't figure that out, why are there extra accusatives here, again, we want to get used to the idea that, oh, that's the aha moment where you have to think about indirect statement. And number 4 here, we talked about the infinitives with accusative endings, the ones that have the participles, perfect passive or future active. Anytime they have an accusative ending, an os, as, or that's a dead ringer for an indirect statement. Big clue for you right there. So we have some exercises for you here. Caesar says that he will conquer Gaul. Pick a tense. I'll give you a second. Stop the video, and then we'll go on. Caesar says, Dicat present tense, that he will conquer. That's going to be a time after, so that's a future infinitive. So that's going to be victurum esse. Next one down here. Caesar said that Gaul had been conquered by him. Notice the as say here. This say is by him, referring to the subject of the main verb. Okay. He said that Gaul had been conquered. Time before, it's got to be passive, and it's got to be a perfect infinitive. That's going to be victam esse right there. Your next one, Caesar says that he conquered Gaul. He conquered time before. It's active, so vicisse. It says, the conquered happened before the saying there. Number 4, Caesar says that he has conquered Gaul. Says present tense. He has conquered. That's time before, and it's active. That is also vicisse. Caesar says that he would conquer Gaul. Said is a past tense verb. Would conquer is going to be time after. So future infinitive, victurum esse. So, in sum, for our indirect statement, the speaker reports a statement somebody else made, or that somebody made. Could be him or her. The cause is expressed by accusative and infinitive. The introductory verb, you have an introductory verb of thinking, knowing, saying, or showing. You have to pay careful attention to the tenses. You have to sort that out before you've got a good handle on it. It often has a say in it. And the infinitives, we need to look out for infinitives with accusative endings. Good luck with indirect statement. Thank you very much.